Good morning. The subcommittee will come to order. I welcome the witnesses and subcommittee members to today's hearing. As I've often said in the subcommittee, this is not a bipartisan committee. This is a nonpartisan committee, and we owe that to those who have served our country. This legislative hearing will continue in that spirit. We've got 14 important legislative proposals to consider here today. It's important to note that not all of these proposals will move forward to the legislative process. We hold legislative hearings to learn from VA and other groups about their views on the bills to ensure members are making informed decisions, and when they do or do not, mark them up. We value the insight provided by these stakeholders and agencies as an essential part of this process. A number of these proposals seek to improve education programs for American veterans to ensure that taxpayers' dollars are used responsibly, and I specifically want to highlight three of my bills that are on today's agenda. My first bill will modernize the requirements for Xxxx on campus officers, or Xxxx, and allow employees to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree in the relevant field of study instead of a master's degree. This change would allow our Xxxx to serve more students and veterans on campus without a degradation of those services. Another bill that I have is restoring the VA Home Loan Program in Perpetuity Act. This legislation would limit the number of direct loans VA is authorized to purchase back to what the VA had traditionally done before the creation of the VA Services Purchase Program, or VASP. I believe if we don't change VASP, this program will continue to be a Trojan horse on VA's books that could ruin the VA Home Loan Program forever. Listen, the two greatest programs ever developed by this government are the GI Bill and the VA Home Loan Program, and I'm not going to allow either one of those to fail. I have used my right to get a home loan I've used my VA home loan guarantee to buy homes several times, and if the Biden version of VASP is allowed to continue, I fear that the home loan will not exist in the future for my fellow veterans. My bill is needed to change to protect the benefit that has helped so many veterans since 1943. My final bill would provide an option for the waterfall for veterans going through the loss mitigation by establishing a partial claim program. This program would bring the VA Home Loan Program on par with other programs such as FHA, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. Many of you have heard express my concerns and frustration with the idea of VA taking responsibility for as many 60,000 mortgages that would put American taxpayers on the hook when the foreclosures are to the tune of $16 trillion through VASP. This legislation would allow VA to provide limited assistance and includes mechanisms to encourage repayments as soon as veterans are able. I look forward to working with the minority to see if we can find a better way to help the veterans without destroying the VA Home Loan Program. Additional bills that we will consider will address the VRE program, adaptive automobile equipment, GI Bill, and homeless programs through the VA. I have reservations about some of these proposals on the agenda today, and the witnesses' testimony and questions from the members will hopefully address some of these issues so we can make an informed decision about whether to move these bills forward through the legislative process. We look forward to hearing from the members who have introduced these proposals, as well as our witnesses, on how we can continue to improve these bills and better the lives of our veterans. I now yield to my friend, Mr. Pappas, the ranking member, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you to my friend, the chairman, for holding this hearing. And we all know that for agencies to be able to carry out their duties, our work here is critically important. And I know we have several pieces of legislation that we'll consider. Some of them are very strong pieces of legislation, and I want to take this opportunity to highlight a few of them. On the agenda today, there are 3 bills that are intended to improve the VR&E program, including my legislation to improve the experience for VA and veterans to ensure that each veteran has the best possible chance for a successful outcome in the program, and I thank the chairman for including this bill on the agenda. I think we all recognize that we can write whatever bills we want to with respect to VR&E, but if VA continues to terminate employees at the same rate it has over the last weeks, it won't matter. We're hearing from student veterans around the country who have seen impacts to the VR&E program following the DOJ firings. Now, in late 2024, this subcommittee held a hearing on VR&E where one of the main takeaways was that it's not employing enough counselors and support staff. And we know this has been an issue for a long period of time. However, some of the DOJ firings were from the VR&E program from individuals who were just hired. So instead of making progress, we're going in the wrong direction. That has undoubtedly increased wait times for new student veterans to enroll, will cause delays for existing student veterans to get class materials. So we need to hear more about this. I want to quote Chairman Bost, who said that he takes Secretary Collins' quote at his word when he says there will be no impact to the delivery of care benefits and services for veterans with this plan. So let's be honest with ourselves and frankly taxpayers. We know there will be impacts, and I urge Secretary Collins to grab the wheel from DOJ, change course, bring back the lost staff to VR&E and other critical areas within VA. Now, moving on to the rest of the items on the agenda, I'm really thankful to Chairman Van Orden for including 3 more critical measures: the End Veteran Homelessness Act, the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act, and the Fair Access to Co-ops Act in the agenda. There's been significant progress made during the last 4 presidential administrations from both parties to end veteran homelessness. That includes a 52% reduction in veterans experiencing homelessness, according to HUD. The End Veteran Homelessness Act from Ranking Member Takano is a visionary bill that will be the final piece of this important puzzle. It will make more veterans eligible for the programs Congress has already authorized, closing gaps in eligibility. Next, the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act, introduced by our colleague Mike Levin, would finally provide GI Bill parity of benefits to our Guard and Reserve members. The bill's overdue. We simply depend on Guard and Reserve forces more, and it's time the benefit keeps pace with the demands. Finally, the Fair Access to Co-ops Act from Representative Meng. The VA Loan Guarantee Program, commonly known as VA Home Loan Program, is one of the best benefits that a veteran can utilize. But the benefit is not able to be used for co-op housing. Many of us have co-op housing in our district, and I hope we can continue to work on this legislation so veterans who are searching for housing are able to consider all options for their home purchases. Again, I want to thank the chairman, our witnesses, and those who are watching for making this hearing happen, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Pappas. I will now introduce the witness panel. Our first witness is Mr. John Bell, the Executive Director of Loan Guaranteeing Services at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Bell is accompanied by Mr. Nick Pamperin, Executive Director of Veterans Readiness and Employment, Mr. Thomas Alfonso, Education Director of Education Services, and Ms. Jill Albanese, Director of Clinical Operations. Will the witnesses please rise? Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You may be seated. Thank you. The record will reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. All the witnesses will respect the 5-minute rule, so thank you very much. Mr. Bell, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony on behalf of the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Good morning, Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Pappas, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting us here today to present our views on several bills that would affect the Department of Veterans Affairs, programs, and services. Joining me today are Nick Pamperin, Executive Director of VBA's Veteran Readiness and Employment Service, Mr. Tom Alfonso, Assistant Director of Policy and Implementation from VBA's Education Service, and Ms. Jill Albanese, the Director of Clinical Operations and Senior Advisor to the Executive Director for the VA Homeless Program Office at VHA. While VA's views on all of the bills are detailed in my written testimony, including areas of concern and support, I'd like to highlight several bills in my opening remarks. First, VA supports the Modernizing Veteran Success on Campus Experience Act of 2025, as it would allow VA to hire staff to perform services that do not require a master levels counseling degree. This would improve veterans' overall access to services, including counselors with higher level degrees, to support them in their educational and career goals. VA also appreciates this committee's efforts to expand veterans' opportunities for accredited independent study programs, and as such supports the Vets Opportunity Act of 2025. VA also supports the draft Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act, but we have concerns as to whether the Department of Defense would be able to provide the data necessary for implementation. Further, if DoD has the data readily available, VA anticipates needing 18 to 24 months to take the necessary adjustments to our adjudication procedures. VA strongly supports efforts to end veteran homelessness, and as such, we support the End Veteran Homelessness Act of 2025. However, we do not support the Homeless Grant and Per Diem Program Applications Bill because we believe it to be unnecessary and overly prescriptive. Finally, VA supports the Assist Act of 2025, subject to amendments. VA appreciates that the bill would allow VA to provide any medically necessary automobile adaptation for safe entry, exit, and operation of a vehicle. However, including non-articulating trailers, which are separate conveyance, would significantly increase cost to VA and taxpayers without a clear benefit to veterans that is aligned with the program. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. We appreciate congressional intent and welcome the opportunity to work closely with the Congress on all of the bills on today's agenda. My colleagues and I are prepared to respond to any questions on these bills that you or other members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. The written statement of Mr. Bell will be entered into the hearing record. We'll now proceed with questionings. With questioning, I ask all members and to please respect the 5-minute rule. And again, if you want to go into a second round, we'll be more than happy to. I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Pappas, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pamperin, I wanted to see if I could start with you. Last week, members of the Student Veterans of America were on the Hill advocating for policy, also raising alarm bells regarding VR&E. And considering the legislation before us, I want to gain a greater understanding of the health of the program. And we sent over some questions last month, but wondering if you could answer a few of the questions contained in that letter today. So counselors were deemed essential and ineligible from the fork in the road. Is that correct?
I appreciate the question. Counselors were exempt from
Okay.
VRP.
So have any individuals within the VR&E program, such as VRS positions that support counselors and allow them to take on more cases, have any of them been removed by recent VA terminations?
Respectfully, I'll have to take that for the record, sir.
So is it correct that VR&E counselor positions are not exempt from the hiring freeze?
I will have to take that for the record.
Okay. And have any VR&E counselors left the program voluntarily or involuntarily since the hiring freeze was put in place? If so, how many?
I don't have a number as for how many have voluntarily left. I will take that for the record.
Do you have any sense if, we had this hearing, as I mentioned in my opening last year, about the dire need to onboard more counselors to support this program that's a game changer for veterans. Do you have any sense if we're moving in the right direction with respect to the VR&E workforce?
Respectfully, I'll have to take that for the record.
Okay. Last year, wait times were bad, in some cases 6 to 8 months. That was before recent actions have been taken, including a hiring freeze that was put in place. And we heard from student veterans last week that were enrolled in VR&E that have reported longer wait times. So can you speak to the issue of wait times, if those have increased?
Respectfully, sir, I don't have the numbers for the wait times at this time. I will have to take that for the record.
Okay. We're talking about basic information that impacts a critical program that provides for our veterans. We're talking about staffing levels, wait times. These are not new issues. These are issues that have been before this committee for some period of time and have elicited bipartisan concern. We did send a letter last month. We are really interested in your attention to these issues and await any response you can give us. I want to move to my legislation, which is a draft bill to redevelop the individualized vocational rehab plan. I want to thank the chairman again for including this legislation in draft form. I'm wondering if employment outcomes currently are the only reason that a plan might be developed, and what are other reasons why one might be changed?
I appreciate the question, sir. There are a number of reasons why a plan may be redeveloped. If a veteran's disabilities worsen over time and that employment outcome is no longer viable, that's an option to redevelop a plan. If labor market conditions change for a track that a veteran is in, and that's no longer a viable option, a plan can be redeveloped. We do support this legislation as it removes some what I'll call squishy language, like if applicable, and really lays out much more defined conditions for when a plan can be redeveloped, making it a much more consistent decision.
Do repeated changes to an individualized plan impact counselor caseloads, and could that result in longer wait times?
It would not affect a counselor's caseload if they're already in a plan. That veteran is already captured in that counselor's workload, sir.
Mr. Bell, if I could turn to you, we know there's great support for the VA loan guarantee program, and I'm wondering if you can provide some more information about the direction of this program. How many individuals are employed at the VA Home Loan Guarantee Office?
I'll have to take that for the record and get back to you, sir.
Okay, and similarly to my questions for Mr. Pamperin, have we seen any terminations in this office? If so, how many?
I will take that for the record and get back to you, sir.
Any employees in that office take the fork in the road?
I will take that for the record and get back to you, sir.
So it's been reported that tens of thousands of homeowners are at risk of foreclosure, could be eligible for VASP, and I think this is a serious concern that we've got to focus on. There are roughly 35,000 homeless veterans on any given day. How many veterans are supported by VASP currently? And I see my time's almost out.
We have 15,000 veterans that are in the VASP program, sir.
Look forward to those, to follow up on those questions that I asked you. Yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady, Ms. King-Hines, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Van Orden, and thank you to all the witnesses for being with us today. So I'm from the Northern Mariana Islands, and throughout a series of these hearings, I've been talking about issues with access to services, right, and the limited opportunities for our vets to avail of a lot of these programs and services. And so I want to ensure that when we have policy conversations that the people in the territories and remote and rural areas are at the forefront of these conversations because they're heavily impacted. And so my question is to Ms. Albanese. All right. So I know that this committee has heard concerns that urban GPD providers have a significantly bigger support network than their rural counterparts, which has led to rural providers not being able to submit the applications correctly and creating a lack of transitional housing in rural communities. Would you know if this would be the case in the CNMI, if this program currently is available to the territories?
So the GPD program, as well as many of our other homeless programs, are available throughout the country and in territories. We do have a very competitive grant application process. We're happy to work with the committee on any concerns about the grant application process, but those grants would be available.
Okay. Are you seeing any challenges with regards to the lack of community organizations that the VA can work with to be able to administer some of these programs, or issues with the fact that because of the thresholds, right, that are provided by law or by rule, which limits the opportunity for the territories to be able to participate?
I'm not aware of any particular barriers to any providers that are trying to get grants. We have a wide variety of grantees that do receive grants through all of our grant programs. But again, we'd be happy to work with the committee on any concerns around barriers to applications.
Okay, thank you for that. My next question is to Mr. Pamperin. So we've heard a lot of stories about how veterans basically are getting ghosted by their counselors, right, and have no way of reaching out to anyone. Do you believe there's a need for a hotline or available contact information for the VR&E program, and would this hotline be also available to areas like the territory and remote areas?
Appreciate the question, ma'am. There is a piece of pending legislation to add a VR&E specific portion to the education call center, which we do support. As far as availability for the territories, logistically, I'd have to take that for the record. I'm not quite sure I know the answer to that, ma'am.
All right, that would be great. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The chair now recognizes Mrs. Ramirez for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. In the past 72 hours, I've received about 20,000 messages from constituents, from veterans and family members of veterans, demanding that I do everything in my power to ensure that the VA and the services for our veterans are not destroyed. And so as I start my questions, I want to say clearly to all our veterans and to all the families who wrote to me. I have over 20,000 veterans in my district, and I need you to know that your message and your mission is received. And I want to use today for some real talk about the impact of the must-Trump agenda on veteran homelessness. The VA and its staff provide services and programs that prevent and end veteran homelessness, which is precisely why I was alarmed by the VA's recent opposition to the End Veteran Homelessness Act of 2025. You would think that at a time when the administration's irresponsible firing spree is disproportionately impacting veterans and stripping veteran employees of the VA and other agencies of their gainful employment, we would be doing everything in our resource and at our disposal to ensure more veterans are placed into and retain housing. So, Ms. Albanese, I want to direct this question to you. Are there currently unutilized HUD-VASH vouchers that could be used to house veterans?
Yes, there are currently around 10,000 HUD-VASH vouchers available for use.
So there's about 88,000 vouchers under lease, and there are, what, over 24,000 unutilized?
We have over 90,000 veterans under lease in HUD-VASH. We do set aside some vouchers for project-based developments, and right now when we kind of take away the total available vouchers for use and then those set-asides, we have about 10,000 vouchers available for use.
Okay, so let me ask you a follow-up question. Are there homeless veterans who cannot access the HUD-VASH programs because they're ineligible?
There are eligibility restrictions for veterans, so yes, the answer.
So your answer is yes.
Yes, sir.
There are homeless veterans who cannot access the program because they're ineligible. So let me ask you a follow-up question. There are about if there are about 24,000 unused vouchers, we'd say, would the End Veteran Homelessness Act of 2025 bill address eligibility issues for veterans who currently cannot use HUD-VASH to help us get those outstanding vouchers utilized? Yes or no?
Yes, the bill does broaden the eligibility for veterans.
And therefore, it makes it possible for these veterans who are currently ineligible to get access, correct?
Potentially, yes.
So let me ask you another question here. Will this bill allow veterans who are housed under another type of voucher but need VASH case management to transfer into the HUD-VASH program and free up their existing voucher for someone else in need?
It would allow the transfer, yes.
Okay. And I worked in homelessness and addressing homelessness for many years, so this is actually a very important issue to me. So I have a couple more questions for you. Would this bill make it easier for public housing authorities to use all their HUD-VASH vouchers by allowing them to use administrative funds to incentivize landlords to rent to veterans?
We would need to work with our HUD colleagues on that. HUD directs the PHAs, not VA, and there are a variety of reasons for why vouchers can't be leased up through PHAs, but potentially it could help, yes.
Okay, so my last question to you is, would helping VA and HUD utilize all the HUD-VASH vouchers help communities end veteran homelessness? Yes or no? Would it help?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Albanese, based on what I'm hearing, the End Veteran Homelessness Act of 2025 would go a long way towards solving some of the most critical barriers to housing for homeless veterans. Secretary Collins claims to care about getting veterans off the streets and into housing, but in opposing a bill that directly addresses how the HUD-VASH program can be used to house unhoused veterans, we can see that this administration doesn't actually really care about addressing homelessness. I mean, how do you say you care and you're opposing this bill that would help so many veterans who currently are ineligible access these vouchers? And so let me say this, Chairman, to Secretary Collins, not to you. I don't know how you can say that you care deeply and actually do the opposite. Everything the administration is doing will only result in more veterans and their families pushed into homelessness, and anyone who gives a damn about veterans should support the End Veteran Homelessness Act of 2025. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields. The chair now recognizes Mr. Barrett from the great state of Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate
Directly
it.
across the
Lake Michigan.
Lake Wisconsin from.
Appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us today. I'm not sure, perhaps Mr. Bell, I know you kind of gave the opening remarks. Would you be the best person to speak on the Assist Act and your department's position on that?
That would be me.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, ma'am, and appreciate you joining us today. I know that, and maybe you can help walk me through, I know generally the department's supportive, but you had some questions or concerns about the issue about non-articulating trailers. Could you kind of walk me through that?
Yes, correct. So basically, it's a safety concern, and these devices are not necessarily part of a vehicle modification. They're separate devices for the most part. And the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has not signed off on safety for those, and so therefore we're not able to sign off on those either. And we do have concerns about the safety. The other amendment, if I may, is that we do feel that it would be better to just define this more broadly as any medical necessary device. That way, it would give us more flexibility. Technology changes all the time with prosthetics and such, and so this would give us more flexibility in the future.
Well, we don't want to work ourselves out of a job here. You know, someone's got to write the next bill for, no, I'm just teasing you, but appreciate that, that insight, and I think that's helpful. And appreciate the general support from the department as well. On the issue, though, of the non-articulating trailers, it's my understanding that a number of veterans, and I've heard from veteran organizations about this, they use those for other mobility devices that they would use a motorized, wheel, or a automated wheelchair of some kind or another, a scooter device, something like that. They may not have any other way of transporting that equipment otherwise, and what would be the department's view or vantage point of figuring out a way to integrate that need into what we're trying to accomplish in this bill?
I may need to take that for the record, but it is my understanding that there is other legislation that does allow for the non-articulating trailers, but again, it would be best for me to take that for the record.
Okay, no, I appreciate your feedback and insight on that. The other question I had was about the GI Bill, National Guard and Reserve component, GI Bill, I'm trying to find that. I think it is HR 1423. Who would be best to?
That's me.
Very good, thank you, sir. I understand that in the remarks you said that you were concerned, I believe, about the DOD transferring over records in relation to what that would require. Can you help me understand that better? I feel like, I served in Reserve Guard component as well as active component, like many of our reserve component members do, where they're activated for a period and then put back on, a non-activated status. And I don't feel like those records should be difficult to transfer.
Right, our statement is that we currently do data transfers with Department of Defense. It doesn't include this data. So our statement is we'd first have to contact DOD. We're not saying the data isn't available. We're saying we don't know. We have to first confirm what's available through DOD, then confirm, well, how can they be transferred, if we have to update memorandums of understanding or anything of the sort, and then build the infrastructure for the data to be transferred and moved into our systems.
Okay. Well, I have a specific interest in VA technology systems, so I look forward to working with you in that regard. I think it's something that certainly is within our capability of doing. I hope it's within the department's capability of doing. Certainly happy to press the DOD on how we can do that, because I think it's something that would make a big, significant difference for individuals who served in many regards on multiple deployments themselves, but may not have achieved the specific active component segmented time that would add up to their full benefits for the GI Bill. So look forward to working with you in that effort as well. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Ambede for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As an Army veteran and former intelligence officer, I understand the critical importance of ensuring our veterans have access to economic opportunities and support they have earned through their service. Arizona is home to Luke Air Force Base, and a growing number of veterans rely on programs like the VA Home Loan, Veteran Readiness and Employment and Education Benefits, which my bipartisan bill seeks to address. But many of these bills we are discussing today directly impact the lives of thousands of veterans in my district and across Arizona. Now, my first question is for you, Mr. Bell. As you may know, Arizona is experiencing rapid growth, economic growth, but also significant challenges in our housing affordability, like so many other states. Our veterans deserve stability and security in their homes, but I'm concerned about the VA's Veteran Affairs Servicing Purchase Program, VASP, potentially placing additional risk on taxpayers. Could you explain how the VA justifies servicing tens of thousands of mortgages through VASP as a better financial alternative than implementing a partial claims program?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. VASP was a last resort option that through the time where we saw significant increase in interest rates, we had a majority of our portfolio that had lower interest rates. So we were trying to, at the time, the VA was trying to help both reduce monthly mortgage payments as well as account for the arrearages over a specified period of time. It is not the end-all, be-all program to help our veterans. We know that there's other loss mitigation options and tools that are available, and we look forward to working with the administration to, one, evaluate where we currently are, and then as well come back and work with the committee to continue to expand those opportunities.
Well, now currently with President Trump in office, we've seen a lowering of the interest rates. Is there a plan for the VA to adjust to that?
We continue to see strong performance from our VA portfolio. Matter of fact, we're up in every category from a loan guarantee standpoint. We are up a year over year in purchase and refinance with, as well as our comparative default ratios versus other programs. So we're continuing to see VA perform very well against its competition.
So is VASP going to start limiting its usage when the home interest rates keep going down?
Again, I do not want to get ahead of the administration and the administration goals as to the future of VASP or the future of the program. What I can say is it never was intended as the stopgap for all mortgages or a long-term program in the home loan guarantee program.
And does the VA have the authority to implement a partial claim program?
That's a great question, sir. And I would say that through our current legal landscape, there's nothing in the statutory framework that expressly authorizes VA to do that. Under the original partial claim program that we had during COVID, that was we utilized the CARES Act and the emergency procedures that we had in place. Those currently do not exist. So we would look forward to working with the committee as well as, of course, with the administration to make sure that we are lockstep in how we're moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Alfonso, regarding the Veteran Education and Technical Skills, the VETS Opportunity Act, how will this bill specifically benefit veterans pursuing online education programs?
Thank you. So it does add additional, it removes some bars that currently exist in statute to some of the online, but it does add specifically provisions that said it must engage with substantial interaction with an instructor. So it opens up the opportunity and it adds some barriers, some guardrails.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from the great state of Kentucky, Mr. McGarvey, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. Look, it goes without saying we're in a housing crisis right now in this country, and nearly half of our renter households, I think we talk about home ownership a lot. Let's talk about people who rent for a second. Those households are, quote, cost burdened. That's a really nice term to say that they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs, and it is really, really something that makes a change in their daily life. So, home prices have gone up. Supply isn't keeping pace with demand. This is all to say the little guy is getting squeezed out. That's why the VA home loan program is so important. We know what the GI Bill did for the middle class in this country. We know we're in a housing crisis. I think that the words homeless veteran shouldn't exist. We need to do something big. We need to think of like a Marshall Plan for housing, bold. We need to build. We need to make access easier. We need to help bring the cost down for people who want to own a home and for people who want to rent, in particular, our veterans. But the federal backstop for so much of the lending market is what keeps this thing running. And so today I want to make sure that we get these bills right. Mr. Bell, in December of 2023, the VA issued an advance notice of proposed rulemaking related to the VA home loan program, for which those at home just means the government puts out a request saying, hey, we're thinking of doing this, what are your thoughts? The VA wanted to gather ideas for how to simplify or update the minimum property requirements needed for properties to qualify for a VA home loan. That notice was December 2023, and I don't believe the VA has issued anything since. So, Mr. Bell, can you provide us, what are the VA's plans to move forward with this process? Can you provide us a timeline?
Thank you for this question, and I will say that from someone who has utilized this program myself and would not have been able to purchase a home at the time that I was able to utilize the program, we continue to try to improve it. A lot of that has to do with how parental that we really need to be in that home buying process. We want to make sure that we have a safe, sanitary, and secure environment that veterans can purchase in, but we also do not want to step in and prevent veterans from being able to utilize a home loan when they need it. We did go out with an advance notice of public rule in December of 2023. With that, we have received multiple responses as to how to better align ourselves with other programs like Fannie, Freddie, the conventional market space, so that VA doesn't stand alone. We are in the process of doing our due diligence through that reg making, but the general gist of that is how do we help when we can help and not be as parental when we need to, as we have been in the past.
I appreciate that. And in the time we've got left, just quickly turn to partial claims that we've talked about. This has come up a lot because there's been extensive discussion around the VA's authority to implement a partial claim program without congressional action. There's many in the mortgage and lending industry who strongly believe VA already has this authority under existing statute. Can you commit to providing a detailed analysis of VA's legal authority to establish a partial claim program within 60 days? What are your thoughts on this?
Yes, sir. We'll be happy to. I will take that back and with the administration. Again, we are right now evaluating, making sure that our administration has all the requirements that they need in which to make the decision to move forward. So we're in the process of doing that right now. So we certainly can. We'll come back with the committee and work with the committee on how to get more tools for veterans in the future.
And I appreciate that. And you and I have not really worked together before, but we get a virtually identical answer every time we have the VA here. So what we really do want the follow-up. We really do want that analysis. We want it fairly quickly too, not to sit on a shelf and be studied and get a letter to us in 6 months. But we appreciate it. Thanks so much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Hey, this is, I always spot off and say this is not a bipartisan committee. This is a nonpartisan committee, and you're about to find out that I mean what I say. I don't care who is occupying the White House, whether it be a Democrat or a Republican. We have an oversight responsibility to our veterans, not to you. Mr. Pampern, you've been in that seat since 2021. Mr. Bell, you've been in that seat since 2022. And the answers that you gave to my ranking member were wholly underwhelming. Like, you managed to not answer any of the most softball questions you could possibly get. You were completely ill-prepared for this committee hearing. Completely. And that's unacceptable. So let's just bring something up here. Mr. Pappas, I'm going to apologize for these guys to you. I'm not going to tolerate that type of behavior towards my ranking member. I don't care who's in the White House. Is that clear, gentlemen? You shall be prepared when you come to these hearings. To be very clear, let me ask you, Mr. Bell, to your knowledge, did any member of the DOJ office direct who the Veterans Affairs Administration should release from employment?
Sir, I'll have to take that question for the record.
Okay, that's what you said to him the whole time. Mr. Pampern, to your knowledge, anyone from the DOJ office direct the Veterans Affairs Administration who they should release from employment?
I will also have to take
Okay, this is now going to be called the Pappas line of answers, I guess. So that's just not okay, gentlemen. The answer is no. The DOJ office didn't tell you guys who to release. You guys made that decision, and I don't think it was done well. Are either one of you aware of a avenue of recourse if you feel that someone has been released that is going to negatively affect veterans' benefits? Are you aware? I am. There is. There's a way. If you guys feel, if any member of this committee or any of your constituents, gentlemen and gentlelady, feel that there's someone that's been released from the Veterans Affairs Administration and it's going to have a detrimental effect on your constituents, just bring it up. And there's a very clearly articulated way to get them back on board. I'd like to talk about this VASP thing again because this truly is a nightmare. So, Mr. Bell, how many folks are utilizing the VASP program right now, to your knowledge?
15,000, around 15,000.
15,117?
Yes, sir.
And then how much money is that?
So far, that's about $4.8 billion in just volume. But again, that's not taking into consideration the payments for monthly mortgage and
Yep.
interest.
And what was the original estimate per payment, per loan?
I'm sorry, sir, can I?
How much money did you think you were going to spend per loan that the VA bought up?
So our average loan amount is around 320.
Right, that's not what I asked you. I asked you what was the original estimate? It was $292,000, and it's actually $321,000. It doesn't seem like a lot of money, but when you run that by 17,000 cases, it turns out to be a lot of money. How many of these VA loans that you guys bought, how many folks have missed payments?
Right now, there's 31.
31 people?
Yes, sir.
And what are you doing with that?
They will be going through the foreclosure process in the particular states. Every state has different foreclosure requirements. So we are, again, this was a last resort option for our veterans.
I understand the whole developmental process of this, and it was moronic. You said that you don't know if the Veterans Affairs Administration has the statutory authority to do a partial payment. Is that right?
The original partial claim program,
Partial
sir?
claim program.
No, sir.
Okay, so there's something, it's called HR 1815, and that's being introduced today. It's one of the bills we're supposed to be talking about instead of this other stuff, and that's real clear. And I know it because we wrote it. So this gives the Veterans Affairs Administration crystal clear authority for this partial claim thing. And you've got to get online with the rest of these agencies. So in my closing seconds here, I'm going to say this one more time. You guys need to get on your game. It does not matter who is sitting at the White House. I know that President Donald J. Trump is the strongest supporter of veterans of any president in my memory. and he expects more out of you. And you will make sure that when my ranking member is asking you questions, that you have them at your fingertips. This, I'm going to go back and, talk to Mr. Pappas later, is wholly unacceptable. All right, you are excused. I hope you'll stick around for the second panel. The committee will stand in recess for 10 minutes to switch out panels. On our second panel, we'll hear from the following witnesses: Ms. Christina Keenan, Deputy Director of National Legislative Services, Veterans of Foreign Wars; Ms. Julie Howell, Associated Legislative Director for the Government Relations, Paralyzed Veterans of America; Ms. Elizabeth Ballas, Executive Vice President of Servicing at Carrington Mortgage on behalf of Mortgage Bankers Association, Mr. Tobias Peter, Co-Director of the Housing Center and Senior Fellow, American Enterprise Institute, and Mr. Will Hubbard, Vice President for Veterans and Military Policy, Veterans Education Success. I'd now like to welcome the witnesses to our second panel and ask them to stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Let the record reflect that all witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Ms. Keenan, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Pappas, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the men and women of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States and its auxiliary, thank you for the opportunity to provide our remarks on legislation pending before the subcommittee. The VFW's views on all the bills can be found in my written testimony. I will take the opportunity to briefly highlight 4 of them. The VFW strongly supports H.R. 1423, the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act of 2025, to allow any day in uniform for which military pay is received to count toward post-9/11 GI Bill eligibility. The sacrifices of reserve component members have been overlooked for decades, despite an increase in activations since September 11, 2001. Currently, eligibility is based on active duty service, but for those in reserve components, basic and initial skills training, annual training, and drill weekends are deemed non-qualifying service. Full-time National Guard and certain responses to national emergencies also do not qualify. I served 6 years in the Army National Guard. Between training, Guard service, and 2 deployments, which took me away from school and work, I had more than 2 years of full-time service. I only earned 60% of the full GI Bill benefit. Had every day been counted, I would have earned 70% of that benefit. The VFW urges Congress to pass this legislation to allow reserve component members to rightfully earn GI Bill benefits for every day served. The VFW supports H.R. 980, Modernizing the Veterans On-Campus Experience Act of 2025, to remove the master's level education requirement for vet success on campus or VSOC counselors. A master's degree requirement is more appropriate for voc rehab counselors, or VRCs, who provide specific casework and counseling for VRNE veterans. VSOC counselors are different. They work on college campuses and provide all student veterans and service members with support to navigate their VA benefits and other resources to successfully complete their education. VA should have the flexibility to hire more VSOC counselors to assist veterans on campuses. Removing the education requirement enables more people, including veterans, to apply for these important jobs. The VFW appreciates the intent of the Veterans Readiness and Employment Transparency Act of 2025 and supports certain provisions to make improvements to the VRNE program. The VFW supports the provision to require counselors to provide veterans with in-person briefings about VRNE services, or virtually if the school is more than 150 miles from the assigned VA regional office. Student veterans tell us that they want more interaction and more information from VRNE counselors, and this is a good step forward. The VFW supports the provision to require VA to provide an annual report on the number of veterans who request an extension of their VRNE program. This would provide important oversight. It could identify veterans who are not making progress and who may need to have their rehabilitation plans reworked. This reporting could help reduce waste and abuse of the program, safeguarding this benefit for veterans who truly need it. And lastly, the VFW supports the End Veteran Homelessness Act of 2025 to modify the Joint Department of Housing and Urban Development and VA Supportive Housing Program, or HUD-VASH. This program combines HUD's housing choice vouchers for rental assistance with VA case management and supportive services. This proposal would expand case management for homeless veterans and provide assistance with administrative fees such as security deposits. The bill would establish an annual report on the HUD-VASH program, including usage data, staffing, services provided, and barriers that prevent voucher use. It would include a GAO report on the characteristics of homeless veterans served by the program. These reports would provide important information on the effectiveness of the program. Understanding the needs of homeless veterans can help us fill the gaps to ensure veterans do not face homelessness again in the future. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Pappas, this concludes my testimony. I'm prepared to take any questions you or the subcommittee members may have.
Thank you, Ms. Keenan. The written statement of Ms. Keenan will be entered into the hearing record. In accordance with Committee Rule 5 Echo, I ask unanimous consent that Representative Elbernelty from the great state of California be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearing. Without objection, so ordered. Ms. Howell, you're now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Pappas, and members of the subcommittee, Paralyzed Veterans of America appreciates this opportunity to share our views on some of the legislation being considered before the subcommittee today. PVA members, or veterans who have incurred a spinal cord injury or disorder, or SCID, experience the breadth of VA care and benefits in unique ways due to their injuries and illnesses. While our written testimony discusses many of the bills before the subcommittee today in detail, I'd like to use this opportunity to highlight a few that are of particular importance to PVA members. H.R. 1364, the Automotive Support Services to Improve Safe Transportation Act of 2025, or the ASSIST Act, would provide technical fixes to the Veterans Auto and Education Improvement Act of 2022. PVA members worked tirelessly in the 117th Congress to secure passage of this important legislation to update the VA's Auto Grant Program and the Department's Automobile Adaptive Equipment Program, or AAE, to include certain vehicle adaptations in the VA medical benefits package to ensure all catastrophically disabled veterans can access necessary vehicle modifications. This is a critical benefit for PVA members. The AAE program allows veterans to live a more independent life, to get to work, to get to their VA appointments. It even allows them a couple times a year to drive to Washington, D.C. and advocate for themselves in PVA, like several of our executive committee members did last week. Unfortunately, the current wording in the Veterans Auto Education Improvement Act unintentionally limits and in some cases prevents veterans from being able to make necessary modifications to their vehicles. The ASSIST Act fixes this language, and it will help ensure veterans are able to receive this assistance in the way that Congress intended. Chairman Van Orden, we thank you for being receptive to stakeholder feedback last Congress in regards to H.R. 980, the Modernizing the Veterans On-Campus Experience Act of 2025. This bill would reduce the education requirement for a Veteran Success on Campus, or VSOC counselor, which PVA believes is an important first step in overhauling the VSOC program. We look forward to working with VA and the subcommittee to transform the program into something more comprehensive, more accessible to more student veterans in the future. Finally, H.R. 1793 seeks to improve VA's outreach to VRNE participants and codify these efforts for VRNE staff. We commend the intent of this bill, but we believe its overly prescriptive language will create additional and unnecessary burdens for vocational rehabilitation counselors, or VRCs. The consensus is that the VRNE program is incredibly difficult to contact, and nobody at this table will argue that fact. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, the 1-800 number for each regional office had a prompt connecting veterans with the VRNE office. VA should return to this practice, which would ensure that staff answering phones have a solid understanding of the program and are able to answer the complex questions presented by veterans. As well-intended as the in-person outreach briefings required by this bill are, PVA believes that a majority of these could be held virtually. As of February 27th, the VRNE program had around 1,000 VRCs working almost 183,000 active cases. This is well beyond the 1-to-125 ratio, which is guided program staffing. The program has seen exponential growth in recent years, and counselors are struggling to keep up with the workload. Adding several in-person briefings to their list of responsibilities will make it even more difficult for them to maintain the necessary communications and engagement with the veteran clients they serve. Furthermore, the bill says that only a VRC can provide these informational briefings, even though support staff from the VRNE program are more than capable of offering such a resource. We would be happy to work with Congressman Hamada's office to ensure that this legislation fully addresses the needs of PVA members and all VRNE beneficiaries. In closing, each piece of legislation today can only be effectively implemented if VA has staff and the necessary resources to carry them out. Without proper support, legislation designed to meet the need of veterans will likely miss the mark and could even fail. Veterans with SCID and other significant disabilities cannot afford to lose the support and services that promote their independence and well-being. Thank you again for the opportunity to share our views on some of the bills before the committee today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Howell. The written statement of Ms. Howell will be entered into the hearing record. Now, is it Balsay? Okay. Ms. Balsay, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Pappas, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the Mortgage Bankers Association. My name is Elizabeth Balsay, and I am the Executive Vice President of Servicing at Carrington Mortgage Services. I'm here in my capacity as a member of MBA. As a lender with extensive experience in servicing VA mortgages, I am honored to testify before this panel. MBA appreciates the subcommittee's commitment to preserving and strengthening the VA Home Loan Program, ensuring it remains an effective and accessible option for our nation's heroes. Veterans have earned this benefit, and it is our shared responsibility to help them achieve sustainable homeownership. A key priority for MBA and our members is ensuring that if a veteran homeowner faces financial hardship, they have loss mitigation options that are on par with FHA. Especially in today's volatile interest rate environment, veterans deserve the same level of protection as other federally backed borrowers. Unfortunately, the VA Home Loan Program lacks a permanent partial claim option, which is a widely used tool that allows borrowers facing temporary hardship to move missed payments to the end of the loan. This ensures stability without the burden of immediate repayment. A partial claim is a proven foreclosure prevention tool used by FHA. It would allow veterans to stay in their homes while VA and taxpayers remain protected because the funds are repaid when the veteran sells or refinances. Despite the introduction of the VASP program to address the current high interest rate environment, veterans should not have fewer loss mitigation options. A permanent partial claim program will protect veterans and the VA. MBA supports the partial claim program in the VA Home Loan Program Reform Act. However, several changes are needed to ensure the program is workable and provides maximum benefit to veterans. First, the bill must clarify that a partial claim does not reduce the VA guarantee on the first mortgage. If a partial claim is deducted from the 25% loan guarantee, lenders will be left with little to no remaining coverage, increasing risk and making VA loans less competitive in the market. This could reduce veterans' access to VA mortgages. Second, the bill currently requires veterans to begin repaying their partial claim within 3 years to maintain a 0% interest rate, with a 0.5% interest rate imposed if repayment is delayed. Veterans should not be subjected to unnecessary repayment burdens that could jeopardize the ability to remain in their homes. This is inconsistent with other government partial claims and would prove difficult to operationalize. Third, the bill sunsets the partial claim program on September 30th, 2027. This would significantly limit its effectiveness. A longer effective window, such as 5 years, would ensure meaningful assistance for more veterans. Finally, shifting to VASP, this tool has provided critical relief to thousands of veterans whose loan payments became unaffordable in today's higher rate environment. While partial claims should be the first line of defense, VASP has been an essential safety net for borrowers who had no other options. Without VASP, VA would have foreclosed on tens of thousands of borrowers. MBA strongly opposes the Restoring the VA Home Loan Program and Perpetuity Act, which imposes an arbitrary cap of 250 loans per fiscal year. Rather than limiting VA's ability to assist veterans, Congress should focus on strengthening loss mitigation tools like a permanent partial claim so that VASP becomes a tool of last resort, not the only option available. Another ongoing concern for the MBA is the VA funding fee, which has been repeatedly increased or extended to offset the costs of unrelated veteran benefits. We urge Congress to stop using the VA funding fee as a budgetary offset and ensure it remains aligned with the Home Loan Program's mission. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. MBA looks forward to working with you to establish a permanent partial claim program, improve and preserve VASP as a necessary tool, and ensure the VA Home Loan Program remains a strong and competitive option for veterans. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Balsay. The written statement of Ms. Balsay will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. Peter, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Pappas, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. The VA loan program consistently outperforms other government-backed mortgage programs in managing mortgage risk. For example, during the aftermath of the great financial crisis, VA loans had default rates half the levels of FHA, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac loans after adjusting for differences in risk profiles. Even in recent years, VA serious delinquency rates have been half of those of FHA, despite serving borrowers with similar risk profiles. The VA's superior performance is due to several factors, including prudent underwriting that incorporates residual income requirements that ensure borrowers can afford their loans, a veteran-focused appraisal process that reduces inflated valuations, and the VA's 25% stop-loss provision, which, unlike FHA's 100% loan coverage, ensures alignment in interests between veterans, the VA, and servicers. Despite these strengths, VA loan servicing is at a crossroads. While no one wants to see foreclosures, especially amongst veterans, a system that eliminates foreclosures entirely is unsustainable, much like religion without hell. Furthermore, history shows that government programs often start small but expand unsustainably, the federal student loan program being a prime example. The same risks exist in expanded VA loss mitigation efforts. They include short-term reductions in delinquency rate may be misleading, as borrowers may continue to struggle and others that may not need the benefit take it up. Increased risk of looser lending standards and greater political interference, higher taxpayer exposure as greater federal backing means eventual costs are borne by the public. The VA Servicing Purchase Program, the VASP program, has fundamentally altered the VA's role in lending in veteran housing finance, offering overly generous forms of relief which could create moral hazard, and it has shifted the VA from guaranteeing loans to directly managing them. This represents significant risk. It could disrupt the alignment between private services, the VA, and veterans. It could disadvantage veterans in the long run as the VA lacks expertise in large-scale loan servicing, and it could lead to greater taxpayer exposure as VASP defers risk rather than resolving it. Similar pitfalls have already played out in the student loan program when in 2010, the federal government eliminated private underwriting and put loans on its books, leading to uncontrolled borrowing and skyrocketing tuition. Then income-driven repayment plans and loan forgiveness shifted costs to taxpayers and increased moral hazard. And remember that originally, the student loan program was supposed to be a moneymaker for the federal government. VASP follows the same trajectory, turning VA lending into an entitlement-like program, weakening market discipline and increasing long-term costs. Given that the VA intends to serve over 40,000 veterans through this program, I commend the committee's leadership to limit its expansion by capping VA loan purchases and exploring options for the sale of VASP loans to the private sector. The proposed loss mitigation option in the VA Home Loan Program Reform Act are a better alternative to VASP, but still represent significant challenges. Partial claims are treated as a last resort, but this could incentivize servicers to bypass traditional loss mitigation and shift risk to taxpayers. It front-loads partial claims against the 25% stop loss, potentially limiting future loss mitigation options for veterans. And the 2027 sunset provision helps curb taxpayer exposure, but there's no overall cap on the program, so increasing the risk of moral hazard and strategic defaults. While this proposal is an improvement over VASP, it should not be seen as a long-term solution. The VA's overarching goal should be to promote sustainable homeownership without relying on government bailouts. The VA Loan Guarantee Program has consistently proven to be far more effective at managing risks than other federal housing programs. Instead of diluting the VA's successful model to resemble less successful programs, other agencies should be learning from the VA's success. Furthermore, my research on over 1.2 million GSE and VA loans originated in 2006 to 2007, just before the severe stress event of the global financial crisis, demonstrates that prudent underwriting upfront can dramatically reduce default rates even under severe economic stress. Ultimately, the VA Loan Guarantee Program should protect both veterans and taxpayers while preserving its integrity and stability over the long run. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Peter. The chair now recognizes Mr. Hubbard for 5 minutes.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Pappas, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of Veterans Education Success. We are a nonprofit organization with the mission of working on a bipartisan basis to advance higher education success for veterans, service members, and military families, and to protect the integrity and promise of the GI Bill and other federal education programs. Before I turn to the legislation at hand, the news of staffing cuts at VA demands our attention. Echoing Chairman Boss' statement last week, we are anxious to understand the impact of these cuts on VA's ability to deliver veteran services to veterans, especially the GI Bill, as well as the mental health impact on veterans who have been dismissed from federal service. We urge the subcommittee to make inquiries to capture that data. Turning to legislation, we offer our strong support for the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act and express our gratitude for the bipartisan, bicameral support of that long overdue measure. We do have concerns about 3 bills on today's agenda and the likely unintended consequences of each. First, we strongly oppose the Vets Opportunity Act as written. It poses very serious risks to taxpayers and veterans by opening up the GI Bill to fraud, waste, and abuse that Congress wisely excluded in overwhelmingly bipartisan agreement when Section 3680 Alpha was last amended in 2017. Past congressional action on this issue was well-founded. The purpose was to protect veterans from predatory programs that lack accountability and often deliver little more than YouTube videos disguised as instruction. One veteran told us they replayed free web seminars as training and used unqualified people to lead classes. Everything they did, I could have done for free. This bill would open up the floodgates to such abuses, and we encourage its reconsideration. Lastly, this bill is unnecessary because Section 3680 Alpha, subsection A, paragraph 4, already allows hybrid college degree and certificate programs at all types of institutions of higher learning, including for-profit schools. Next, we support the intent of the Reforming Education for Veterans Act to protect student veterans called to active service. However, these protections already exist under the Xxxx and Roe Act and the Higher Education Opportunity Act, making this bill largely duplicative. More concerning, Section 3 would limit compliance surveys for multi-campus institutions to just 1 per institution. This is a dangerous proposal, given to some of the worst GI Bill abuses occur at chain schools. Our research showed that from 2009 to 2017, 8 of the 10 schools receiving the most GI Bill funds were at multi-campus chains, 7 of which faced law enforcement action for fraudulent recruiting and loan schemes. Less than 28% of their students graduated, and only half earned more than a high school graduate, so by definition, earned less than a high school graduate. We do support Section 4, which ensures timely updates to school certifying officials, and encourage its inclusion in future legislation. Finally, we oppose the current version of the Safe Veterans Act, which removes key oversight measures for flight training under VA's VR&E program. Flight schools have a long history of GI Bill abuse. As former House Veterans Affairs Chairman Jeff Miller put it, the flight school loophole is so big you can fly a 747 through it. This bill removes safeguards without adding new protections, potentially leaving a veteran without a career path while wasting GI Bill funds. We urge the subcommittee to reconsider this legislation. Thank you for your time and commitment to these issues. I look forward to any questions that you or any members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. Both Mr. Peter and Mr. Hubbard's testimony will be entered into the hearing record. We'll now proceed to question. I recognize Ranking Member Mr. Pappas for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hubbard, maybe I could start with you on that last bill that you mentioned, and appreciate you highlighting the long history of GI Bill abuse that exists and concern around removing safeguards. And so this SAFE Act would allow flight training programs that don't lead to a degree to be approved under the VR&E program. Certainly support the goal of getting veterans into aviation. I'm sure you share that goal. But concerned about the consequences of this, because if a veteran finishes the program, for whatever reason, the veteran doesn't become a pilot, and there could be any number of reasons why that happens, wouldn't these veterans lose out on an opportunity to be prepared for a career? And shouldn't the benefits for flight training come at least with some guarantee that there's going to be a job at the end of the program?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Ranking Member. We would agree, and ultimately, it's not just about inputs and outputs, but about outcomes. And if a veteran is left with an experience that doesn't give them long-term career stability, ultimately that doesn't succeed by the standards and the purpose of the GI Bill, which is to provide for long-term transition. And so we appreciate your question. We look forward to working with you and members of the subcommittee on that legislation.
Thank you. Ms. Howell, I don't know if you have any reflections on that particular bill, but wondering if you share the concerns that Mr. Hubbard raised on that legislation, and if you can think of any ways that we could improve the legislation.
Thank you for the question, sir. You will notice that bill is absent in our written testimony. We determined not to take an opinion on this bill at this time.
Okay. Well, thanks for that, but I certainly do appreciate your feedback about VR&E generally, just how we've blown past the ratios that should be broadly accepted, and the way that impacts the ability of individuals to get access to the support that they need. And certainly look forward to hearing more detail from VA on the questions that they failed to answer today, that we will insist on getting the answers to, because we know there's a lot more ground we've got to cover with respect to having the counselors in place and making sure the workload is distributed in an appropriate fashion so that that program succeeds. Ms. Balsay, if I could turn to you next. Thank you very much for your comments. And when you think about VASP, we know that up to 80,000 veteran homeowners are at risk of foreclosure, could be eligible for the program. We heard on the last panel that there are 15,000 that are currently in VASP. My concern about this program, and you talk about this could be a tool of last resort here, but if it were to end tomorrow, you could potentially see these individuals in dire straits. So what would happen to homeowners that are currently enrolled in the program were the plug to be just pulled altogether?
As far as, I'm going to bifurcate that. Thank you for the question. So as far as, homeowners that have qualified, we're certainly in the transfer process to VA's subservicer, and I'm sure they would move on their way. But if the program if VASP was stopped today, the veterans that have requested assistance, right now their only option is if they can't do a short-term repayment plan, is modification. So at this week's rate of 6.75%, even if they've got a 5% mortgage and you're taking care of any delinquency, even going out 40 years, you're going to increase that veteran's mortgage payment. That's where if we had the partial claim in the waterfall, that is interest rate indifferent, right? So regardless of your rate environment, if you've got that partial claim as one of the first steps in your waterfall, someone gets 8 months behind, they can get caught up and resume their normal payments without going through the payment shock of a modification.
You mentioned disparities that exist between VA loans and other federally backed loans. Could you talk about some of those differences and features that could potentially be utilized to assist veterans? And would that, in your opinion, in any way be diluting the integrity of the program?
Thank you. So FHA has a partial claim program. USDA has, they call it the MRA, but it's a similar partial claim program. Fannie and Freddie have deferrals. So every federally backed loan except VA loans have partial claims. And when VA did release the partial claim program as an emergency program during COVID, it was used very effectively. But yes, the other federally backed loans all have something similar it is only VA that does not.
Thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair now recognizes Representative King Hines from the Northern Mariana Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm very interested in HR 1423, which is the parity, the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act. I really support it, and with just the number of people who are signing up in the military or the National Guard in the CNMI, there's been a lot of conversation in our community. But if you've been paying attention to what's happening here in Congress, there's a lot of consternation with regards to mandatory spending, right, and increasing, and just the cost of that program. And so I just kind of wanted to hear from the VFW, because you are the voice of so many people who have served this country. What are different ideas or recommendations where we can look at this as an opportunity to have a win-win, to be able to provide well-deserved benefits to those folks who have served our country?
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the question. This is about recognizing every day in service. The more that our reserve component service members serve in natural disasters, domestically, border security, even security around the Capitol for certain events, it's to honor that every day that somebody wears the uniform, that they're receiving military pay, to go toward these education benefits, which are going to help them in the future. So it's really safeguarding the future of veterans so that they are gainfully employed when they do leave the service.
Thank you for that. And speaking of education, and because you are the voice of many veterans, this question is, what are you, Can you just elaborate a little bit more on the importance of the Veteran Readiness and Employment Transparency Act and your thoughts and its importance to student veterans across the country?
So we've provided testimony in the last couple of years of needed improvements to the VRNE program. So aspects of this bill we support, as in having more interaction with VA counselors, the VRNE counselors and the VSOC counselors, and the school certifying officials, but also the veterans that they serve. So these are things that the schools have asked more for, and students have asked for that as well. So we see some of these provisions as a step in the right direction.
I guess I just wanted to highlight or underscore, like this bill attempts to address a certain issue, and I just wanted to underscore what those challenges are and what we're trying to fix. So thank you. Thank you for being here today. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes Ms. Ramirez from the great state of Illinois.
Thank you, Chairman, from the generally good state of Wisconsin. Just kidding. Great state, a neighbor to Illinois. I want to jump right in. I want to talk specifically about HR 1814, the Restoring the VA Home Loan Program and Perpetuity Act of 2025. Ms. Balse, thank you for letting us know how to pronounce your name. I appreciate it. Your testimony was very critical of the Home Loan Program and Perpetuity Act. You, in your testimony, expressed concern over limiting the Veteran Affairs Servicing Purchase the VASP program to 250 individuals. And so I wanted to ask you directly a couple questions, if you can answer them together. Why is it so damaging to veterans? And are you aware how a figure like 250 borrowers was determined? And is there an appropriate cap?
I'll answer the second one. Thank you for the question. I'll answer the second one first, if that's okay. I don't know how the number 250 was come up with. It seems, again, very, very low for the number of veteran homeowners we have in the United States. It's low for the number in Carrington's portfolio. And as far as answering your first question, as far as underscoring
why it would be so damaging to veterans?
Yeah, right now, look, before VASP was brought out, servicers agreed to a voluntary moratorium. Most servicers did, because we were told a new loss submit program was coming out. If VASP had not been rolled out, and there would have been no moratorium, VA would have foreclosed on tens of thousands of homeowners. Again, there's a limit to affordability, and in a changing rate environment, if you're at 3% going 6.75, that's just not workable for veterans, even when they want to keep their home. So I think with it as the last step in your loss mitigation waterfall, It is a needed step, and right now, it's kind of the only step.
Yeah. I'm going to skip over here because you actually just said what I was
Sorry.
about to say here. We're thinking alike. So without VASP, the risk of veteran foreclosures, it's only going to grow. And in response to this crisis of foreclosure and housing instability, my colleagues across the aisle proposed this legislation that would severely limit access to VASP. So I have a follow-up question for you, Ms. Balse. Can you quickly explain what the potential consequences would be for veterans and their families if VASP was eliminated before a permanent partial claim program would be established? What would be the impact on these borrowers, the servicers, and the overall stability of the VA loan program?
Foreclosure. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
you know.
Period.
Yeah, period. That's really where it's going to come to. Some may choose to sell their home and may have equity depending on when they bought and if they didn't use the 100%. But the short answer is foreclosure.
Thank you, Ms. Balse. I think it's really important to put that on the record. I mean, what we're trying to do is create housing stability for our veterans, not foreclosure. So thank you for that. I want to pivot real quick for the time that I have in fact left to talk a little bit about HR 1458. And we know that it's equally important that we're looking at how veterans are being supported in the pursuit of their education. In my work to restore GI Bill benefits for veteran students defrauded by educational institutions, I've heard about programs that exploit veterans' hard-earned GI benefits by charging them thousands of dollars, which I think, Mr. Hubbard, you were just talking about, for content that they could have easily found for free online. Ms. Keenan and Mr. Hubbard, isn't it alarming that some of these so-called educational programs are charging veterans thousands of dollars for nothing more than content they could find free on YouTube? I see you're not. I think you say yes. So let me follow up with a more direct question. Can you explain why a veteran's hard-earned education benefits should go toward an unaccredited independent study program with zero quality control? I'll let Ms. Keenan start because I know you've already shared some already.
Yeah, thank you. I'd appreciate the question. I mean, we're happy to work with your office on finding the right way to hold these schools accountable and to provide the best educational opportunities for veterans. How that's actually done so that it's not overly restrictive, I think there's a balance there, but we definitely want to ensure that those hard-earned GI Bill benefits go toward education that actually helps veterans get jobs later.
Thank you. Mr. Hubbard, 5 seconds. Anything to add to that?
I'll be brief. When a veteran goes to a college or program, they expect quality, and that's what they should be getting.
Got it. Thank you. So in my 10 seconds, my opinion, we need to make sure that we're standing up to these Trump agendas that are waging war on our veterans. The bills that we are asking to be considered feel deeply unserious if they're not actually creating more education opportunities and housing stability for our veterans. With that, I yield.
The gentlelady yields. In accordance with Committee Rule 5 Echo, I ask unanimous consent that Representative Meng, Ms. Meng, from the great state of New York, be permitted to participate in today's subcommittee hearing. Without objection, so ordered. The chair now recognizes Mr. Olbenorti from the great state of California for 5 minutes, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you and the subcommittee for including my bill in this hearing, the Streamlining Aviation for Eligible Veterans Act, or SAFE Veterans Act. This important but very simple piece of legislation enables veterans who qualify for vocational flight training through the Veteran Readiness and Employment Program the ability to complete flight training through a flight school. This will increase flexibility for veterans seeking vocational flight training outside of a college degree program while simultaneously working to address the U.S. airline pilot shortage. As we all know, the VR&E program is an important component of veterans' benefits, providing services to eligible service members and veterans with service-connected disabilities to help them prepare for, obtain, and maintain suitable employment or achieve independence in daily living. The program currently requires flight training programs to be tied to traditional four-year college degrees to receive funding. However, most major airlines no longer require college degrees to enter the cockpit. The SAFE Veterans Act takes action accordingly to remove the VR&E degree program requirement specifically for flight training programs, helping to put more veterans in the cockpit. While roughly 2/3 of airline pilots were veterans in 1980, that number has dropped to only around 30% currently. Simultaneously, the United States has experienced a growing pilot shortage over the past decade that's been exacerbated in the post-COVID era. As a result, major airlines have resorted to canceling flights, parking regional jets in long-term storage, and leaving travelers stranded. Increasing opportunities for veterans to return to the commercial airline cockpit through the Safe Veterans Act will address the ongoing pilot shortage while dramatically increasing accessibility of vocational flight training programs for those who have served. And so that's why I'm honored that my bill was included as part of this hearing, and I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues on the subcommittee to get this bill to the President's desk. And it's an honor to be carrying this legislation again. We had broad bipartisan support for it when it passed out of this committee last year. Just to address, Mr. Hubbard, your objections in your testimony, you asserted that the bill removes safeguards. I would vehemently disagree with that. This is a very simple bill. The operative part of the bill is a single sentence. All it does is remove the requirement that flight training programs include a 4-year degree. And I would assert, since airlines are no longer requiring a 4-year degree, that removing that requirement makes perfect sense because it focuses the efficient use of taxpayer resources to get our veterans the vocational training that they need for the job that they're training for. Ms. Keenan, I appreciated in your testimony that the VFW supports the Safe Veterans Act. Could you talk a little bit about how this bill brings parity to the flight training within the VRNE program?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Since this is an option for those using their GI Bill benefits, we think this is a reasonable expansion for VRNE recipients. Additionally, if between the veteran and their voc rehab counselor, if it's determined that this kind of education would be beneficial for their employment outcomes, then we see this as a reasonable addition.
Thank you. I would agree, and I appreciate your support. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and thanks for including the bill in your hearing today. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The chair now recognizes Ms. Meng from New York for 5 minutes.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Pappas, and distinguished members of the House Veteran Affairs Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, thank you for allowing me to testify today. I would also like to thank Ms. Christina Keenan from the VFW and Ms. Julie Howell from the Paralyzed Veterans of America for testifying in support of my legislation. I am honored to once again speak in support of my Fair Access to Co-ops for Veterans Act, which would finally allow veterans to purchase cooperative housing units, also known as co-ops, through the VA Home Loan Program. The VA Home Loan Program has been a transformative benefit for service members for over 80 years, but this program can't be fully enjoyed by New Yorkers who served in our armed forces. In New York City, about 2 out of 3 apartment buildings are co-ops, and if you've seen New York, you know that's a lot of co-ops. Co-ops on average are more affordable in New York than condos or homes. They offer a realistic way for working-class New Yorkers to own their place and build equity. Currently, a veteran or service member can use their VA home loan to purchase a condo, a townhome, a mobile home, or a manufactured home, but not a co-op. Last year, a recently married service member in the New York Army National Guard reached out to my office asking why he could not use a major benefit like the VA home loan on New York's most affordable housing option. His story is typical amongst the roughly 200,000 veterans that call New York home and countless other veterans in towns and cities across the country where co-ops are present, like Palm Beach, Minneapolis, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. It's our job to serve those who serve us. So let's serve them by increasing the accessibility of home ownership to more veterans. Let's expand the American dream that the VA Home Loan Program helped define over 80 years ago. Let's give veterans and service members access to co-ops. I look forward to working with the chairman and the ranking member to get this legislation over the finish line. Thank you again for your time and consideration of this matter. I ask the chairman, ranking member, and distinguished members of the subcommittee to please support my Fair Access to Co-ops for Veterans Act. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes myself for 5 minutes. Okay. Let's talk about this vast thing again here. Ms. Balsay, you are representing mortgage brokers. let's say Mr. Peter has a loan and he doesn't pay the loan back. And Ms. Howell's the VA. Okay, so her nose, I know, she just crinkled her nose. Let the record reflect that Ms. Howell crinkled her nose. So Mr. Peter defaults on his loan and you're getting stiffed, right? Because you're out of money. And then that loan's at, let's just say 8%, right? And then Ms. Howell goes, hey, I got a great idea. We're just sitting around here. Let's go ahead and buy the loan and reduce the interest rate from 8% to 2.5%. Who pays the difference? Because you expect to get paid that you lent that money at 8%. You're expecting that money to come back, right? At 8%?
Correct.
Okay, so who pays the difference? Everybody in this room. So as a mortgage broker, I'd be like, yeah, this VASP thing's the best thing ever because it makes you whole. It gets rid of a bum loan and it passes it off to the American taxpayers. So let's be frank here, ma'am. If I were a mortgage broker, I'd say this is the best thing ever because I get to lend out all this money and then I get rid of it. Everyone else is going to pick up the slack. That's what's taking place here. So who administers this loan once Ms. Howell has taken it over?
The VA's subservicer that they've hired.
Who is that?
I believe it's PHH.
Okay, and what else does PHH do?
They service loans for many other, they're a loan servicer.
Like who?
Various investors.
And what's the VIG?
Pardon?
What's the VIG? What are they getting? No one does anything for free, ma'am.
True. No one services loans for free, trust me.
Right.
But no, I do not, I'm not privy to the terms of their
So the
contract.
Veterans Affairs Administration is going to buy Mr. Peters' loan, make you whole for the delta between the interest rate agreed to and the interest rate it's going to be at now. And the VA doesn't know how to administer loans, so they hire somebody else out, probably the same people they were administering the loan to begin with.
So no, and look, I'm not made whole. I'm servicers, if I'm again the servicer here, I make money by servicing loans.
No, you're not the servicer.
So-
It's your loan.
Oh, I thought it was his loan.
Right, he borrowed the money from you.
Got it. Okay, well, so it's my loan.
Right.
And VA bought it at 2.5%, which again, we modify loans in our portfolio back when interest rates were down to that
Right.
all the time. So the difference there, the delta, is just part of doing business. So his loan leaves me at Carrington, it goes to PHH.
Right.
I no longer have a loan to make money off of.
You don't.
PHH and the VA.
You don't have a loan to make money off of, but you got the money because the loan's been paid.
I was paid. There are losses that I suffer from each loan that leaves
So
my
my
portfolio.
point is this. It sounds like this great altruistic program, and it's not. And if I was a mortgage broker and I just had a mortgage broker hat on, I'd be like, let's keep this going. Let's keep it rolling. If I was just an American taxpayer, I took my mortgage broker hat off, I'd say this is a travesty. And it is, and we're not going to do it. So, Mr. Peter, can you expand a little bit between this? Because I think it's very salient, the point that you brought up, where the student loan program really sounded like a great idea. Can you kind of like draw the parallel here? Because everyone can clearly identify, including the Supreme Court of the United States, who said that President Biden did not have the legal authority to relieve these student loans. And he said, I'm going to do it anyway. So if everybody up and down the chain of command, except for the student who's getting this money for free, including the Supreme Court, says this is a bad idea, could you draw this parallel so that everybody understands the potential horrible ramifications for this?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, once the federal government takes over a loan and puts it on its own books, as this happened with the student loans, but here happens with the VASP program, where it becomes, from a private sector loan, becomes a direct loan on the books of the, in the case of a student loan of the Treasury, and now here in this case of the VA. They're not, the guardrails are gone. The federal government can just say, well, from now on, we're going to reduce the payments that you have to make. Or you just don't have to pay, for a certain amount of time. Or after 15, 20 years, your loan is forgiven. And once in this scenario that you outlined, I may be talking to my other friends, and they realize that this is that they can get the same deal. They may stop making payments on their loans as well.
Mr. Peters, thank you. I want to be respectful of my colleagues' time, and my time has expired. I want to thank you all for attending this hearing, and I appreciate the discussion today. I really do. There's several bills in here that are awesome. There's a couple that need some work on it. I want to thank all the members and the subcommittee staff for working on this. And with that, I'd like to yield to my ranking member, Mr. Pappas, for any concluding remarks he may have.
Well, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your comments, and I thank the intention of all the sponsors of these bills for trying to think about ways that we can improve services and programs that benefit America's veterans. And I agree with you. I think some of these bills are strong in their current form. Others are going to require us to sharpen our pencils. But I'm just really appreciative of this panel's feedback, and we look to continuing to engage with you all in the road ahead as we potentially head to marking up some of these bills. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Pappas. So just to be clear, I understand everyone's intentions are pure. I really do. I also understand that something is broken. And in the history of when someone lent someone some seashells to buy a cave, there was never a VASP program. It just didn't exist in the history of lending. And I don't think that, a couple guys cooking up some ideas during a worldwide pandemic, I think they may have missed the mark boldly. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for participating in this, and I've received a number of statements for the record, which will be submitted into the record as long as they may meet the submission requirements. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned.